When reflecting on ancient Greece, one cannot overlook Sparta, a polis that, despite its relatively small population, was justifiably considered the most powerful and renowned among all Greek city-states. This astonishing paradox inevitably raises the question: how did such a numerically modest society manage to achieve such unprecedented greatness and influence? The answer to this enigma lies in a deep study of the unique legal and social institutions that shaped the life of every Spartan. At the core of this extraordinary system was the genius of the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus. It was he, not by imitating or borrowing from existing sets of rules, who developed a completely new legal code, radically different from anything known before. This innovative and comprehensive system proved to be the key to the phenomenal success of his country and its invincible people, whose methods of upbringing and life still evoke surprise and admiration. While in other Greek polis parents sent their sons to schools where they learned the basics of writing and music, and their childhoods were filled with comfort and luxuries, soft sandals, comfortable clothing, and abundant, unrestricted food, the Spartan approach to raising young men was diametrically opposed and incomparably harsher. Spartan boys never knew the softness of gentle footwear. Their feet were not softened by sandals. Lycurgus, in his wisdom and foresight, mandated that young Spartans walk exclusively barefoot. He firmly believed that this practice would not only toughen their feet, making them impervious to any surface, but also grant the youths unprecedented agility and speed. A barefoot youth, he was convinced, could jump and run much faster than any peer burdened by shoes. Moreover, this rigorous yet effective training provided young Spartans with incredible ease and confidence when ascending steep hills and descending dangerous slopes, minimizing the risk of injury and preparing them for any trials that harsh Spartan life might bring. Lycurgus, among other things, resolutely suppressed any display of effeminacy in Spartan youth, especially regarding their attire. On the contrary, he established a strict custom of wearing the same type of clothing throughout the entire year. Such an ordinance was driven by a deep conviction. Lycurgus believed that this unwavering habit would prepare every citizen to endure harsh seasonal changes, as well as the extreme conditions of heat and cold that were inevitably encountered during military campaigns. Regarding diet, Lycurgus instructed responsible officials to provide boys with enough food to sustain their physical strength, but he strictly forbade them from reaching full satiety. He was firmly convinced that those who underwent such rigorous training and constantly exercised under these conditions would perform significantly better on an empty stomach. Consequently, in the event of a military campaign, when given the appropriate order, adult Spartans could more easily endure a lack of provisions. They were capable of eating whatever was available, while maintaining excellent health and high endurance. Lycurgus also held the opinion that a diet promoting a lean body was far more effective in fostering harmonious growth and a robust physique than abundant consumption of fatty foods. However, the wise Lycurgus also feared that youths might suffer from excessive hunger. Therefore, he permitted them to alleviate this arduous state by stealing provisions. The purpose of this practice is clear. He set the boys a challenging task specifically designed to develop their resourcefulness and cunning. A person contemplating theft would inevitably spend many sleepless nights meticulously planning each step. They would need to carefully conceal their intentions, enlist vigilant accomplices, train lookouts, and informers, and patiently await the opportune moment to execute their daring enterprise. Undoubtedly, Lycurgus created such a system with the sole aim of instilling greater cunning and inventiveness in the boys for acquiring supplies, which served as further and highly effective preparation for future combat operations. Naturally, some might reasonably ask, if Spartan society condones the act of theft, why is a youth caught in the act subjected to such severe punishment? The answer lies in the following. Any student must be punished for improperly or unskillfully performing a task they are diligently taught. Thus, Spartans punish those who are caught precisely because they demonstrated incompetence and a lack of skill in the art of stealthy pilfering, not for the act of theft itself. An examination of the origin of the state inevitably begins with its deep connection to childbearing. In most Greek polis, young women were traditionally destined to fulfill their primary function, motherhood, and their upbringing strictly conformed to established customs. They were mandated to lead a very modest existence, with extremely limited access to any additional consumer goods or even luxury. Moreover, they were often denied pure wine, or their drink was carefully diluted with water, significantly weakening its effect. The public expectations of the Greeks were that their girls should be mostly passive, less active, and significantly more secluded than men. There was a belief that women raised in such constrained conditions would be quite content with quiet domestic work, such as spinning wool or performing other crafts. However, a legitimate question arises: how could one expect women raised in such restricted circumstances to produce truly excellent children? Lycurgus, however, held a different view, believing that the efforts of slave women would be quite sufficient to provide the necessary clothing and perform all other domestic crafts. He was deeply convinced that motherhood represented the most important and fundamental function of free female citizens. Based on this conviction, his primary directive was that women should undergo physical training as intensive for this crucial role as men did for their own civic duties. Thus, he instituted special athletic competitions and rigorous physical fitness tests for female participants. Lycurgus firmly believed that if both parents, both mother and father, were strong, resilient, and energetic individuals, they would undoubtedly produce significantly stronger and more viable offspring. Among other things, Lycurgus abolished the privilege of a man to choose his spouse at will. His decrees ensured that men entered into marriage at the peak of their physical strength, as such an approach significantly contributed to the birth of the healthiest offspring. If a man was elderly or physically infirm, another husband, possessing outstanding mental and physical vigor, could continue the family line on his behalf. Similarly, if a wife proved unable to bear healthy children, the man had the right to resort to the help of a surrogate mother, of course, with the approval of her husband. These children, born in this way, would be recognized as brothers but would be deprived of the right to inherit property. Thus, Lycurgus implemented rules concerning childbearing that radically diverged from the customs of other Greek polis. Through this, he successfully populated Sparta with a generation of men superior to others in height and strength. Anyone who wishes to verify the truth of this statement can personally examine the Spartans and form their own judgment about the achieved effect. If a man feels an attraction to the physical appearance of a boy, such a connection is strictly forbidden, for it is recognized as an abominable act. This prohibition effectively suppressed such a practice. It is as rare as incest with minors or intimate relations between siblings. It is not surprising that other Greeks refused to accept this assertion, as their own legislations do not prevent such behavior. Such is the Spartan system of education, and it has been explained in detail how it differs from the systems of other Greek polis. It will be easy for others to judge which system produces citizens distinguished by greater obedience, deep respect for elders, and outstanding self-control. The founder of the Spartan system, Lycurgus, was deeply concerned about the situation of youths in the state, especially when their immediate instructors were absent, leaving them without proper guidance. To prevent potential disorder and ensure continuous supervision, he granted broad authority to every Spartan citizen who happened to be near young people. These citizens were endowed with the exclusive right not only to give orders to boys, prescribing various actions, but also to impose punishments for any misdeeds or disobedience. Such a measure, aimed at maintaining order and discipline, significantly contributed to the development of deep respect for authority and power in general among Spartan youths. Furthermore, Lycurgus rigorously insisted on the formation of strict norms of behavior and manners among Spartan youths. He required them to move in complete silence, always keeping their hands hidden beneath their cloaks, which symbolized humility and readiness for action. Their gaze was to be fixed on the ground, and they were strictly forbidden from looking directly into the eyes of adult citizens, thereby showing the deepest respect and subordination. These precepts served as clear evidence that the degree of modesty and restraint achieved by Spartan men could surpass even the high standards traditionally expected of women. Indeed, observing them, one would sooner expect a silent stone statue to speak than to hear even the slightest outburst of emotion or involuntary exclamation from a Spartan youth. It seemed it would be easier to attract the attention of a motionless bronze figure than to elicit an involuntary reaction from these young men. Without a doubt, Lycurgus firmly believed in the fundamental role of competition as a driving force for progress. He was convinced that if he could inspire young people to compete with each other for certain outstanding positions and recognition, each of them could rise to an unprecedentedly high level of masculine valor and perfection. He actively encouraged this competition, seeing it not just as a personal achievement, but as having profound meaning for the entire society. This tireless struggle for excellence, as the Spartans believed, was highly valued by the gods themselves. Each participant, striving for absolute superiority, exerted all their personal strength and abilities, and it was through such intense efforts and aspirations that they not only maintained but steadily strengthened their polis, making it invincible and prosperous. Previously, the legislative acts introduced by Lycurgus to regulate each successive stage in the life of a Spartan citizen were discussed in detail. Now, the system that this great lawgiver established for all adult citizens will be presented. Lycurgus, as is known, implemented customs and orders in Sparta that radically differed from those accepted in the vast majority of other Greek polis. In other Greek polis, as a rule, the male population sought to accumulate maximum material wealth. Some citizens devoted themselves to agriculture, others became shipowners or merchants, and still others immersed themselves in various crafts. However, in Sparta, Lycurgus categorically forbade free citizens from engaging in any of these commercial or productive activities. He relentlessly insisted that Spartan citizens dedicate themselves exclusively to those pursuits designed to guarantee their political power and independence, that is, the art of warfare. The measures he adopted contributed to the formation of a unique social structure, ensuring all citizens of Sparta a remarkably similar standard of living. Meals were strictly regulated, and food supplies were formed through equal contributions collected in so-called dining clubs, or syssitia. Thus, this completely eliminated the temptation and appeal of accumulating wealth for personal pleasures and luxury. Moreover, there was no temptation to acquire material goods to spend them on expensive clothes or ostentatious splendor. Men in Sparta were judged not by their attire or income, but solely by the perfection of their physical development and physique. A man, of course, could accumulate certain wealth to then spend it on his messmates or for the good of the community, but true respect was earned not through material offerings, but through his personal efforts, valor, and significant achievements. Lycurgus also initiated additional legislative acts designed to curb any opportunities for Spartans to acquire dishonest wealth. First and foremost, he introduced a unique monetary system based on cumbersome iron ingots. Even a sum of 10 minae was so bulky and heavy that it was impossible to discreetly bring it into a dwelling without the knowledge of the owner and his servants. A larger sum of such money would inevitably occupy a significant portion of an entire room and require the use of transport, such as wagons, for conveyance. In addition to this, Sparta had strict rules allowing regular inspections of properties, and if gold or silver was found on the premises, the owner was immediately subjected to a severe fine. Thus, the pursuit of wealth accumulation was effectively eliminated as a central occupation for the citizens of the polis. Furthermore, Lycurgus observed that Spartans, like other Hellenes, led separate lives within their family households, but he was convinced that these private spaces hindered the formation of full social cohesion. In response, he initiated the creation of public dining halls for Spartans, located in places accessible to public view. The food served in these public dining halls was always strictly regulated in quantity, providing each citizen with what was necessary, but precluding excess or deficiency. Lycurgus also abolished the custom of compulsory drinking, the tradition of passing a filled cup around the table. He believed that this practice harmed both physical condition and clarity of mind. Instead, he established a rule that each person should have their own cup and consume beverages only at their own discretion. Lycurgus believed that this was the least harmful and most beneficial way to consume wine. These public dining places also eliminated the possibility that citizens might squander their fortunes and family inheritances by organizing lavish feasts, accompanied by gluttony and intemperate alcohol consumption. Lycurgus, the eminent lawgiver of Sparta, paid particular attention to the impact of diet on the physical condition of working citizens. He concluded that a person diligently performing their duties or possessing exceptional personal qualities would inevitably develop a superior physique. Based on this observation, he required senior instructors in each gymnasium to strictly correlate the intensity of exercises with the volume of food portions consumed. The training exercises developed under his guidance were aimed at the uniform development of all parts of the body, both legs and arms, as well as the neck. Observers and historians agree that Lycurgus achieved significant success in this measure, for Spartans, as is known, have for centuries been the epitome of the most robust health and outstanding physical strength among all peoples. Spartan institutions differed from typical Greek practices in other aspects of societal organization as well. In most polis, each citizen had sole control over their children, servants, and personal property. However, Lycurgus sought to ensure that all citizens of Sparta had common cohesion and derived mutual benefit from one another. Therefore, he granted every father authority not only over his own children but also over those of other men. It was presumed that, possessing such authority, fathers would treat other children exactly as they would want their own to be treated. Indeed, it was considered shameful if a son complained to his father after being struck by another boy's father. Such a son would likely receive another punishment from his own parent. A similar system existed for horses. If a citizen fell ill or needed to reach a place quickly, he was permitted to borrow a horse wherever he found one, emphasizing the principle of shared resources and mutual assistance. Lycurgus devised many excellent plans aimed at ensuring citizens readily obeyed his legislative decrees. However, one of his most ingenious steps was the decision to take his legal code to Delphi, the recognized religious center of the entire Greek world, before presenting it to the Spartan populace. Upon arriving in Delphi accompanied by the most influential Spartan citizens, Lycurgus formally inquired of the god Apollo. He sought to know from the deity whether it would be best for Sparta to follow his new constitution and strictly adhere to the laws he had carefully developed. When the god replied that this constitution was in all respects favorable to Sparta, Lycurgus returned home and presented his laws to the people. In doing so, he made it clear that anyone who dared to reject Apollo's judgment, conveyed through the Pythia, would be deemed guilty of sacrilege. Another achievement of Lycurgus undoubtedly deserves admiration. He managed to convince his people to prefer an honorable death in battle to the shameful life of a coward who avoids fighting. This aspiration represented an undeniable advantage, as Spartans lost a significantly smaller proportion of their warriors by standing firm in battle, rather than fleeing from danger. It is noteworthy that soldiers generally avoid death on the battlefield by displaying valor, not cowardice. Bravery serves as a powerful stimulus for men in combat, endowing them with greater strength and resourcefulness, and evidently it is from valor that the glory all people so crave is derived. Lycurgus ensured that the brave were granted happiness, while the coward inevitably suffered misfortune. However, his methods required further clarification. In other Greek polis, if a person's cowardice was proven, they only suffered reproach and bore the stigma of a coward. Such an individual freely frequented the same market as a brave warrior, and could even sit beside him without hindrance. They were allowed to attend the same gymnasia. However, in Sparta, every citizen would feel deep shame at being near a coward at the dinner table or competing with him in wrestling. When forming teams for sports and athletic competitions, a coward was invariably excluded. He was expelled from the chorus, and at religious gatherings, he was assigned the most dishonorable place. At any public event, he was obliged to yield his seat even to a younger citizen. Such a person was relegated to the company of unmarried women, assigned a domestic role, to join their discussions about the lack of husbands. He was denied the right to marry, and he could gain no benefits from family life. Moreover, if he dared to walk about looking relaxed, like a person without worries, he was attacked, and older citizens mercilessly beat him. Such immense dishonor befell these cowards that death seemed preferable to such a life. These codes of law appeared strange and even outdated to other Greeks, for although they recognized these practices and highly valued Spartan institutions, no other state dared to implement them. The described advantages stemming from such treatment of cowardice benefit the state in both peacetime and war. Furthermore, it can be explained how the measures introduced by the great lawgiver Lycurgus significantly improved Spartan military organization, making it superior to all other systems of its time. The recognition and honors bestowed upon the king in his homeland barely exceeded the respect enjoyed by any ordinary citizen. This order was established purposefully, as Lycurgus sought to prevent the development of despotic pride in the monarch, and also to prevent the envy of fellow citizens at the sight of his royal privileges. However, the laws introduced by Lycurgus do indeed demonstrate the deepest respect for kings in the context of their funeral rites. It was at this exceptional moment that Spartan kings were revered not merely as men, but virtually as demigods. When a period of military action commenced, the council immediately issued an official decree establishing a clearly defined age limit for the mobilization of military contingents. Cavalry and hoplites were recruited first, and then the need for individuals with specific craft skills was carefully identified, and these positions were filled. This approach ensured that during a campaign, the army would be well supplied with all vital materials and necessary skills. All tools and weapons required by the army were accumulated even before the campaign itself began. Lycurgus ordered warriors to wear red battle cloaks, as this attire was perceived as most embodying courage and least associated with feminine dress. In addition, Lycurgus allowed young men to grow long hair, as this visually enhanced their stature, making them appear taller and more imposing. Contrary to widespread belief, Spartan infantry formations were not exceedingly intricate. On the contrary, their formations were characterized by exceptional simplicity of organization, making it impossible for anyone following the maneuver of their comrades to make a mistake. Some warriors had the honor of leading the ranks, while the rest simply followed the general movement. Spartan laws mandated that every warrior meticulously perform gymnastic exercises even during a campaign, which not only strengthened their morale but also allowed them to fully demonstrate exceptional physical prowess. The locations for these training sessions were always situated in close proximity to the regimental area, ensuring that no warrior would be far from their weapons during exercises. Immediately before the start of battle, an order was given to thoroughly polish military equipment. There was also a custom according to which young warriors combed and styled their hair before battle, which was part of their ritual preparation. After this, they were solemnly reminded of their sacred duties, urged to be filled with resolve, and to utter loud battle cries. Completing these preparations, the men collectively shouted words of encouragement to their officers, strengthening overall cohesion. Anyone who had the opportunity to observe these unique preparations would undoubtedly conclude that all other Greek soldiers seemed merely unskilled amateurs, improvising their actions. Only the Spartans appeared as true, unparalleled masters of the art of war. The Greek troops, positioned at the designated location awaiting the Persian invaders, included the following contingents: 300 heavily armed warriors from Sparta, 120 men from Tegea and Mantinea, located in Arcadian Orchomenus, and another 1,000 warriors from other areas of Arcadia. Besides these Arcadians, 400 men arrived from Corinth, 200 from Phlius, and 80 Mycenaeans. From Boeotia came 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans. Each of these detachments had their own commanders representing their cities, but the most revered and supreme leader of the entire army was Leonidas of Lacedaemon. These warriors under Leonidas's command were sent by the Spartans as the vanguard of the main forces with the aim of inspiring the other allies, so that upon seeing their determination, they might arm themselves and not side with the Persians, as some other polis had done. Their initial intention was precisely this. However, the Greeks at Thermopylae, as the Persian army approached the pass entrance, began to feel profound dismay and engaged in heated arguments about whether they should abandon their positions. Leonidas, realizing that he and his men were too few to repel the vast Median army alone, firmly voted to remain in place and immediately send messengers to the cities requesting reinforcements. While the Greeks were engaged in these disputes, Xerxes dispatched a mounted scout to ascertain the enemy's numbers and activities. The horseman rode unhindered to the camp, thoroughly inspected it, and observed the scene carefully. There, he saw some men performing gymnastic exercises, while others were leisurely combing their hair. Astonished by what he saw and having accurately noted the number of Greeks, he returned without any hindrance. No one pursued him, or even paid him any mind. Thus, he reported everything he had witnessed back to Xerxes. When Xerxes heard this report, he was unable to grasp the true meaning of what was happening, that the Lacedaemonians were preparing to fight to the death, either by killing their enemies with all their might or by accepting inevitable doom. Their actions seemed absurd and laughable to him. Therefore, he immediately sent for Demaratus, son of Ariston, who was in his camp, and upon his arrival, Xerxes questioned him thoroughly about everything, seeking to understand the true nature of what the Lacedaemonians were doing. "I already told you, O king," Demaratus began, "about these men when we first set out for Hellas, but then you merely laughed at me. Now listen to me carefully once more. These warriors have come here to fight us for this pass, and this is what they are preparing for their ancient custom bids them comb their hair whenever they are about to expose their lives to mortal danger. Moreover, I tell you that if you defeat them and the few who remain behind in Sparta, there is no other people among all mankind, O king, who will be able to stand and resist you. You now stand face to face with the noblest kingdom and city, and with the most valiant men in all of Hellas." Xerxes found what was said utterly incredible and asked Demaratus further how such a small force could possibly fight against his enormous army. "O king," Demaratus replied, "call me a liar if the outcome of this battle is not precisely as I tell you." Yet Xerxes still did not believe his words. For 4 days, the Persian king waited, all the while expecting the Greek warriors to flee. However, on the 5th day, seeing that they did not retreat and considering their stubborn persistence as an act of shamelessness and folly, he grew enraged. Meanwhile, the Greeks at Thermopylae finally divided. Some advised against abandoning their post under any circumstances, while others adamantly disagreed, and soon they dispersed in different directions. Some departed for their hometowns, while others decided to remain with Leonidas. It is said that Leonidas himself sent them away, wishing to save their lives out of concern for them, but considering it utterly dishonorable for himself and the Spartans to abandon the post they had first come to defend. And so, Xerxes, after performing solemn libations in honor of his son, commenced his attack. The foreign contingents within Xerxes' army rushed forward to attack, but the Greeks under Leonidas, knowing they were going to certain death, now met their enemies outside the narrow pass. Many foreigners were slain there, for their captains marched behind the ranks with whips, driving all the warriors forward with blows. Many were hurled into the sea and drowned, but far more were trampled by one another, with no one paying attention to those perishing. For, as the Greeks knew they were destined to fall at the hands of those who had outflanked them over the mountain, they exerted all their strength against the foreigners in their reckless and desperate valor. By this point, the spears of most Greeks were broken, and they continued to kill the Persians with their swords. There, in that fierce battle, Leonidas fell, fighting with the greatest courage, and with him perished other renowned Spartans. 2 of Xerxes' brothers also fell there in the battle, and a great struggle ensued between the Persians and Lacedaemonians for Leonidas' body, until the Greeks, with their incredible valor, dragged it away and routed their enemies 4 times. They defended themselves with their swords, as long as they still had them, and then with fists and even teeth, until the foreigners overpowered them with missile weapons. Thus bravely fought the Lacedaemonians and Thespians. However, the bravest of all, it is said, was Dionysus, a Spartan, of whom a famous saying has been preserved. Before they engaged in battle with the Medians, Dionysus was told that the enemy was so numerous that when they shot their bows, the sun would be hidden by the countless multitude of arrows. But not at all disturbed by this, Dionysus calmly stated, "You bring us good tidings, for if the Medians obscure the sun, we will fight them in the shade." All of them, including those who perished before anyone left the post at Leonidas' command, were buried where they fell, and an inscription was engraved above them. 4,000 warriors, the flower of Pelops' land, here stood against 3,000,000. This is the general inscription for all the fallen, but the Spartans have their own special epitaph. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their words, we lie." A pertinent question arises. Are the laws of Lycurgus still observed in our era without any changes? To this question, however, it is difficult to give a definitive answer with full certainty. It is known that in former times, citizens of Sparta were strictly forbidden from residing outside their homeland. This restriction was due to concerns about the corrupting influence of foreign connections. Spartans preferred to remain within their native communities, content with modest means and a simple way of life. However, in the modern era, these same people have become supreme rulers of independent polis, and as a consequence, have become vulnerable to the pernicious effects of flattery and corruption. If once the mere possession of gold caused them fear of being detected, now they openly display and even boast about such possessions. In reality, for many influential Spartans, it has become a highly appealing ambition to spend the remainder of their lives outside their native land, holding positions as rulers or administrators in some prosperous foreign region. In bygone days, Spartan leaders strove to earn honorable and high positions within their own state, but now they dishonorably conspire to seize positions of power in foreign communities. In former times, representatives of Greek polis would arrive in Sparta, imploring their state to lead them in the struggle against alleged oppressors. Now, however, many Greeks openly urge one another to unite and resist any potential resurgence of Spartan dominance. It is not surprising that such sharp criticisms are directed precisely at the Spartans. It becomes evident that they no longer follow the precepts and will of their gods, nor the fundamental laws of Lycurgus.